If I step back from everything that you've said thus far and is in your book, it seems as if until 2012 or so, what was rewarded in youth set us up for a more adaptive adulthood. But now everything that's being rewarded in youth, except from schools and teachers and parents, but what's being rewarded on a moment-to-moment basis for the majority of the waking life of these young people is maladaptive.
Yeah, that's right.
It's so stark.
That's right. Think about it this way. Imagine that your children are having a life out in the real world. They're having adventures. They're doing things. They're building forts in the forest. They're doing all sorts of things. And then one day, a casino opens up nearby and it welcomes all the kids. And that's where they spend all their time, is in a casino. And they're in the care of a company that is trying to extract as much money as it can from them. And that's what they do 8 or 10 hours a day. It's an abomination to think that a casino could own our children's childhood. What if it wasn't a casino? What if it was a brothel for the boys? Would be more of interest, let's say. Like, again, inconceivable that we would let that happen. What we've done is we've said, well, what if it's Snapchat? What if it's Instagram? What if it's Facebook? Well, not so much Facebook. What if it's TikTok? These companies, these are some of the largest and most powerful companies in the world. They essentially own our children's childhood. This is where childhood is taking place, on a few giant for-profit platforms that use an advertising-based business model. So they are motivated, like the casino, to keep them in. Don't have a clock. Don't let them see what time it is. Keep them in. Don't let them click over to a link to another site. Keep them in. We somehow have ceded our children's childhood to giant companies that have shown that they don't really care about our kids' welfare. They care much more about profitability, and they care about their customers, who are the advertisers. And these companies have been granted a special writ from the king. Congress said in Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act in 1996, I think it was, Congress said, oh, and nobody can sue you. Nobody can sue you for what you show to their kids. There was a reason for that you don't want AOL to be responsible for everything anyone posts. But it's been so broadly interpreted that so far, any attempt to regulate social media or any attempt to sue them is seen as like, no. So, it's just, we somehow slipped into this. And once you see it that way, that it's as though our kids are being raised in Harrah's casino, no, we've got to stop this.
Last year, I had the opportunity to speak to some of the groups at these companies that are assigned to controlling the well-being of the young people that use their platforms. And the major emphasis was on the type of content. Yeah, so protecting them against child predators, protecting them against pornography. Yeah. But as you recall, at the beginning of the conversation, we broke things down into variables of time, specific content dynamics, and maybe the visual interface itself. I think for sake of today's discussion, the visual interface is probably the least interesting, but I can just tell you, looking at things up close, a lot not good. The eyeball lengthens, you become nearsighted, which is why spending 2 hours outside, even if on a tablet, has been shown to offset myopia in thousands of people, children. Anyway, there's that piece. But the time piece is interesting, right? Maybe limiting the total amount of time on social media. Obviously, the content issue is it only takes one exposure to a video of the sort that you described, the gauntlet. I never want to see it. Whatever has to be done to my phone so that I never see it, please let me know. But it just seems as if this has been allowed to, it's almost like an IV drip of glucose or something happening in the background. We're saying, okay, just stay rigged up to the glucose drip, and then we wonder why we end up with, let's just say, cognitively obese children.
Yeah, that's right. Whenever there's new media, the public's emphasis is always on the content. And so with television, the emphasis was, well, violence on TV. Is this going to make them violent? And it turns out, not really. Watching violence on TV doesn't really make you violent. And video games, these violent video games, these first-person shooter games, are these going to make our kids into killers? And there was a lot of research on that. It looks like, no, it doesn't really do that. And so many researchers then say, see, it's just a moral panic. It's okay. But that's focusing on the content. And this was the great lesson from Marshall McLuhan and Neil Postman and all these great media theorists in the 20th century. McLuhan said the medium is the message. Don't focus so much on the content of television. Focus on the transformation of human life when the television becomes the family hearth and people sit around watching it. Now, from our vantage point today, that's pretty darn social. They're sitting with their family members together, having an experience. But McLuhan's point was, that's the transformative thing, what the technology does. It's not the content. And so in the same way, a life on social media, in some ways, is like television. You're watching stuff, but it's much more behaviorist. With television, you didn't have the constant I do something, I'm rewarded. I do something, I'm rewarded. So social media is much, much more addictive than television ever was. That's one aspect of television is not performative. It doesn't make you live your life in front of a camera. You're not in front of a camera. You're a passive recipient. Whereas social media puts our kids in front of a camera. So in all these ways, we get distracted. And this is the way, in those Senate hearings, it was all focused on content. Can't we reduce the number of beheading videos and the child pornography? Suppose can't we reduce that by 90%? Wouldn't that be great? Senator, we have the world leading technology in doing this. Yes, that would be nice for our kids to see less hardcore porn and less violent videos. That'd be nice. But if we could make Instagram just be happy girls living beautiful lives, and our daughters were to watch 8 hours a day of this, is that good for them? Hell no. So, it is important to clean up the content, but for kids going through puberty, I think the only real answer is just delay. Just don't let them do that.
How much of the issue here is modeling of what adults are doing, and and how terrible or good are adults at modulating their behavior? I say modulating because, I see a lot of parents videotaping everything that they're, on the phone all the time, in line at the store while their kids are around, and one of the reasons I think parents like devices so much is that it's a terrific low cost, zero cost babysitter. It allows them to then go be on their phones or do other things.
Yeah. So young children are sometimes copying their parents. Young children are looking for things to copy. And so, I've got some slides in my regular book lecture of toy iPhones that we give to toddlers so that they can be just like mommy and daddy. For little kids, I think it might matter. For teenagers, I'm very often asked that question and I think it's because parents, they feel a little guilty, like they know that they're modeling bad behavior and they're worried, like, is this setting up my kid for doing that? And I can't say for sure, but my intuition as a social psychologist is not very much. And the reason is because while your kids once looked up to you and they once copied you, like by the time they're 12, 13, 14, if I start reading, The Economist magazine, or if I start knitting or whatever, that's not going to make my 14-year-old daughter want to do those things because I'm doing them. She is completely focused on what her peer group thinks of her. Of course she is. That's the nature of teenagehood. They're moving away from the family and they're trying to make their way on their own in a peer group. Lisa DeMora is great on these issues. So it would be nice if parents could improve their phone habits. And boy, phones at the table, that's an important place. That is a very, very important place. Get across the idea that when we're eating, we're with each other. We're looking at each other and we're tasting our food. We're experiencing the food. So actually modeling collective behaviors like a meal, I think that is actually very, very valuable. But if it's just that, you're often multitasking, you're often on your phone, be nice if you didn't, but that's not going to push your kid over into phone addiction.
So the list of 4 things that you provided are terrific. They are somewhat enforcement focused. As I recall, and maybe this is not true, but as I recall, one of the ways that media was effective in getting kids to stop smoking was to pit them against these wealthy old white men who were in rooms filled with smoke, writhing their hands together, cackling about the amount of money they were making, stealing the health of young people. Whereas telling teenagers that smoking was bad for them did very little.
Right. So
is there a way to create a rebellion of sorts against the smartphone? Because kids love to rebel. Teens love to rebel.
But first of all, they don't anymore.
Oh no, really?
They're just much more passive. I don't think they're authority focused. They're not as rebellious as they used to be.
That's disappointing.
Yeah. Now, of course, we'd have to pit them against a group of young white men who are owning the social media companies, I suppose. But this addiction is very different from tobacco or anything else. Tobacco is biologically addictive. And you can't get an entire high school addicted biologically. At least it didn't happen. In the peak year of smoking was 1997, 37% of American high school students smoked. 2/3 didn't. But with social media, you couldn't have that. You couldn't have just a third. It's either none or everybody, and it's everybody. And it happens in middle school. So the dynamics of a social media addiction it's a social addiction more than a biochemical like nicotine or cocaine type addiction. So I think the way to break out isn't, hey, these people are exploiting you. That might be helpful. We should definitely study that. I think the way to break out is, okay, look, you guys actually, you can see what this is doing to you. You mostly agree that this is wasting your time. It's garbage. You want a way out, but you just feel like you can't. There's such resignation. But look, the cool kids over there, they have flip phones and they're out like every day after school. They're like, they're doing stuff. They're down at, they're in the mall, they're getting pizza, they're, building a fort, whatever, depending on the age. So I think the way out is to give kids an exciting childhood. Kids are so lonely now, and they don't have much in the way of adventure. They don't have much in the way of thrills. I live in New York City. I would like bring my kids out to Coney Island when they were 9, 10 years old. Bring them out, and then I would just say, I'm just going to sit here. You guys run around. You guys go have fun. Like, I'm not going to be with you. Yeah, there's a chance you'll get kidnapped or struck by lightning, although lightning is more likely. And then it got, once they were in more, like, I remember like 13. Now they can actually take the subway out to Coney Island with a friend. So that's cool. I think that's the way to do it. Don't make it like, we're going to take away all this stuff from you. Ha ha ha. Now you have nothing to do. Make it more like, I'm not trying to hurt you here. I want you to have fun the way I did and the way your grandparents did. We all had human childhoods full of adventure. I want that for you. And I think most Gen Z will embrace that. They just don't want to do it alone. So the key is, if you're listening to this podcast, and if you have kids that are in elementary and middle school, be sure to talk with the parents of your kids' friends